What is the link between roads and the climate crisis? Roads are primarily designed for the transportation of people and goods from one place to another, safely, comfortably, and expeditiously. Roads can be constructed using machines or labor-intensive methods. Labor-intensive methods are where labor using hand tools is the primary resource and is supported by light equipment if necessary, thereby creating more employment. Traditionally, road deterioration is largely influenced by the following variables: road building materials, construction methods, terrain along which the road traverses, traffic in terms of the number of vehicles using the road, and the proportion of heavy vehicles to small ones. One heavy vehicle has the same damaging effect as tens of smaller ones. Maintenance strategies and environmental conditions. Quite often, these variables act in combination. For example, use of substandard construction methods, utilizing poor quality materials in hilly terrain, in a high rainfall area, on a poorly maintained but highly trafficked road with heavy vehicles is a cocktail for disaster. But the most important factor accounting for road failure is water. The effect of water can, to a large extent, be controlled by the drainage that is provided. The climate crisis is manifesting in unpredictable weather patterns, characterized by more frequent and more intense rainfall, including cyclones. This means a lot more water. In March 2019, Tropical Cyclone Idai struck Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Malawi. Cyclone Idai is recorded as one of the worst tropical cyclones on record to affect Africa and the Southern Hemisphere. In addition to the human casualties, infrastructure, which includes roads, was destroyed. In April 2019, floods damaged infrastructure in South Africa, including houses, roads, and bridges.
I had the opportunity to visit Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and South Africa to do post-disaster assessments of infrastructure that was left damaged. Besides the loss of human life, these disasters left a trail of destruction in terms of damaged infrastructure, including roads and bridges. With bridges, all of them overtopped. The parapets got damaged, the approaches to the bridges, the fill material was eroded away, the superstructure was left standing. If a disaster of similar magnitude is to strike again, we need to be prepared. First, we need to repair the damage. It's not simply putting back what was there. We need to build back better so that if a similar event occurs, we have less damage if we get damage at all. The next thing we need to do is to climate-proof the infrastructure that was not damaged. This means we have to go back and do some retrofitting in terms of improvements so that the existing infrastructure will not be damaged by similar events. It is better to be prepared to know where your infrastructure is than to start looking for it post-disaster. The third thing we need to do, we need to learn from what has been damaged and revisit our design standards.
In the context of adaptation for roads, this may entail introducing better building standards for disaster risk reduction measures, using materials and construction methods that are more locally attuned and responsive to the local environmental conditions. Rainfall impact and runoff are the main agents of erosion because they both detach and transport soil particles. Road damage can be due to both surface and groundwater. Road failure can either be spectacular, such as when there is a washaway of embankments or bridges, or insidious due to the ingress of water weakening the pavement layers. Surface water damages the road, mainly by eroding the road building materials. Erosion is governed by the following principles. Cohesive soils are less susceptible to erosion than non-cohesive soils. The longer the slope, the more the erosion. The steeper the gradient, the more the erosion. The more the rainfall intensity, the more erosion. The more the vegetative cover, the less the erosion. The groundwater damages the road by weakening the bearing capacity of the subgrade and pavement layers. This water may infiltrate into the pavement from the top and shoulders, or rise into the subgrade either by capillary action or as a result of the elevation of the water table. Where a temporary or permanent water table exists, the road should be raised above the surrounding country. Subsoil drains may be required when it is necessary to drain the water from under the road or away from the backfill of the structures, such as bridges or culverts. Several simple measures can be taken to help mitigate damage to roads with regards to adequate road drainage.
So the overall purpose of grassing on a construction project is mainly for erosion protection. When there's grass, it slows down runoff, which essentially leads to erosion. So it's important everywhere where the natural ground was disturbed to try and establish grass as soon as possible if there's no other measures of erosion protection. Consider the type of grass to be used. Grass that's indigenous to the area, that's adapted to the area, that will grow fast and that will also survive in the long run. Depending on where you use it, you also got to think of what type of grass you use, how big it will get, how tall, what maintenance is required. Some grasses require less maintenance than other, some last longer than other. Hydroseeding is also a way of establishing grass growth. Grass seeds and fertilizers and mulch are mixed in and then sprayed over large areas. This mixture then allows for the fast germination of the grass, can be sprayed over long distances, can be used in inaccessible areas where it's not always easy to access by people, and you get good coverage if applied right. You want to do it in the right time of year when there is some rain expected and also not too much that seeds might wash away.
Cutting grooves along these slopes helps in retaining the seed in the grooves, because what you don't want is a big rain to follow a hydroseeding process, washing all the seed down to the bottom of the slope. Mitre drains are used on roads to convey water off the road into natural areas. Design considerations include having sufficient of them when you're on steep grades, more closely spaced together. They really need to have a capacity that can handle the predicted flow that that particular outlet would anticipate. Cut-off drains are drains at the top of cut slopes, behind the top of the slope, which catch any water heading toward the road down below and convey the water safely to the bottom of the slope on either side of it, then conveyed off to a natural water course. When you construct a cut-off drain, you should consider the flow that it would carry. You need to consider the slope of the drain itself. If the slope is steep and rainwater caught up in it would lead to erosion of the drain, consider lining it with something like stone pitching or other means.
Energy dissipators are usually structures designed for the outlet of a drain. The main purpose is to slow down the velocity of the water before they let out into the natural environment to prevent erosion.
Stone pitching is 300-200 millimeter type of size of stone packed tightly together to deal with erosion caused by water or wind and to protect the underlying earth. Sometimes stone pitching is grouted with cement or embedded in concrete where the flow of stormwater is anticipated to be high, in which case it would lead to erosion below the stone pitching were it not grouted. By its very nature, it is a labor-intensive form of construction.
If you use the same type of stones that's available in the environment, it looks good to the eye, but the main purpose is erosion protection.
Gabions are wire baskets in a cellular format, square cubic meter, or sometimes in a flatter format called Reno mattresses. They are filled with stone. The wire mesh forming the mattress or the gabion are then tied together. Gabions are used in earth-retaining structures but also they're widely used to cut down flow of water, to dissipate energy. They're often used at the ends of pipe culverts, where the pipe culvert discharges into the natural ground. The water would first go into a Reno mattress. The layout of the stone and the fact that there's gaps between them and the roughness of the mattress provides good energy dissipation. Geotextile membranes are either woven or non-woven membranes, used a lot in holding in filtering. For instance, the geotextile would be positioned at the back between the soil and the gabion to allow the groundwater through the geotextile without moving soil through the geotextile. They would also be used in things like subsoil drains, crushed stone drains. It would stop the ingress of finer materials which would then clog the drain.
Biodegradable material can be used in erosion protection. It's not a permanent solution, but it assists with the growth of the grass, so the hydroseed needs to be assisted. Usually on steep slopes where there's not much grip for the grass to grow, you would put a biodegradable material down, which will assist in holding down your seeds and your fertilizers until there's sufficient growth. Usually after a few years, these material will just degrade and will become one with the environment.
Shotcreting is used on unstable slopes which are very steep to prevent the slope from collapsing. Shotcrete is used, and it's basically a fluid concrete mix sprayed onto the slope using high-powered pumps and machinery. You'd have drainage pipes in the shotcreting, also drainage membranes that would prevent the water from exerting any kind of force on the shotcreting.
In rock cuttings, it is difficult and costly to cut cuttings back to a safe slope so that rockfall is not a problem. So what is often done is that wire netting is pinned to the top of a slope. It is hung down the slope, then pinned at intervals into the rock face itself. The mesh itself has apertures 80 by 100, hexagonal. Hexagonal because it's double twisted so that if it cuts, it doesn't unravel. Diamond mesh would just unravel. The mesh serves as a containment of the rock that falls. Any fragments larger than the apertures in the mesh will be contained. Using wire mesh, one can also vegetate the slope by introducing pockets of topsoil and planting them up.
Regardless of the construction materials used, the construction methods implemented, and maintenance strategies adopted, it is important to ensure compliance with the necessary quality assurance procedures in order to optimize the effective lifespan of any infrastructure asset.
When man goes into a catchment and fiddles with it in any way, be it overgrazing at the top of the catchment or introduction of agriculture along the catchment, any hard surfacing such as roads or towns and cities, we change the whole dynamics of the flow. So we look at the catchment in its entirety. Nature naturally creates an equilibrium, and where man has intervened, man has broken that equilibrium. And I think the ultimate engineering quest is to try and restore the equilibrium as naturally as possible. Using grass-lined stormwater channels, including in cities, because the grass-lined channels absorb water but also slow it down. With bridges that are overtopped or drifts that are overtopped and always seem to fail when there's a big flood, the upstream side is where water will go behind them or under them and outflank them or undermine them and make them collapse. There are tried and tested methods that have been used throughout the world. Vetiver grass is a very good one because of its intense root structure and known ability to hold water. The Reno mattresses, together with geotextile below them, is quite effective. So is stone pitching in the right circumstances. But with something hard like a stone pitching, if you get a chink in the armor, you have a break in the structure, it'll tend to fail at that point. Look for roots of plants to hold the soil in place just as Mother Nature intended it.
While we're all focusing on drainage and how to control it, I think it's also important in a water-scarce country like South Africa to look at what can we do with this runoff. We control it and we design for it up to a point and then we let go of it. I think part of drainage we also need to see how we can conserve this runoff water and reuse it.
Climate conditions affect the geographic location of some trees, whose occurrence may also be influenced by certain soil properties. Armed with the knowledge of trees, an engineer can identify areas with potential drainage problems in the road design process.
Natural systems perform better than man-made systems in terms of disaster mitigation, which means us as humans, we fit our designs to what the rest of nature is doing.
As we transition to the fourth industrial revolution in a changing climate, it is imperative to leverage knowledge, tools and resources across non-traditional partners. Who knows, maybe one day we will build roads that perform better the more flooded they become.